This video is brought to you by the WD-40 Company. What's up, guys? Matt here with BleepinJeep. Today, we're still working on the FC. Oh, you know you love it. Today, I've got a couple of axles to put underneath this thing. Yes, we're going to put Rubicon Dana 44 axles under here. Look at that. That's my junk pile of parts. New stuff on bottom, old stuff on top. Come out here with me. We're also working on expanding the shop. I want to show you guys what we're working on here. So, out back, we're adding a 35 by 35 addition. The original shop is 25 by 40. So, if you do the math, it's actually bigger than my current shop. So, it's going to more than double the size. The pictures or the camera just doesn't do it justice, but there is my original shop. You can see it kind of cut out there. So this one is much bigger, much taller. Look how tall this thing is. It's 16 feet, 14 foot, something like that. I think it's 14. It is going to be really tall, and the trusses hadn't even been put on the top yet. I also had some extra time, and we put insulation or heated floors in, and that is going to be the garage door opening. Very big garage door opening for any very big projects I might have in there. I'll have to make the turn, of course. And then over here, you can see on the right side of my shop, it completely fills that space as well. But you can see in here, man, I've just got too much stuff, so I'm going to be super pumped to have more space. You can see this every nook and cranny of this current shop is full of junk and parts and equipment and Jeep FCs that I'm trying to get built. But today we're working on the axle. So here is the rear axle, and today we're going to change out these brakes. Look at the brakes. I mean, these are the e-brakes, but there's not any e-brake material on there. It's just solid. So the first thing that we need to do is remove the brakes. But to do that, you need to check to see if you have a C-clip axle. The best way to do that is for looking for this hole. Look for that hole. If you have that hole, you do not have a C-clip axle, and you'll be able to unbolt this and just pull it right out without having to take the diff cover off and pull the C-clips. One of the things I'm using a lot with this FC project is this WD-40 Specialist Penetrant. I'm using this on every nut and bolt, and this thing is super crunchy in here. There's some bolts we need to take care of, and also some hardware and stuff that I'm going to use to this axle that I bought from this Rubicon. I think it sat at the bottom of the lake or something, and this rust penetrant from WD-40 is really going to help. I'm putting that on the back there too, because I'm going to pull that backing plate off. So anywhere that two parts need to come apart, I'm just soaking this down. Of course, you don't want to hit your brakes with this, but I'll be replacing the brakes, so no worries there. And then put it in this hole and spray it on the bolts. There's 4 bolts back here that need to come off. And yeah, look at how nasty that is in there. That's just gross. Here's a drawing, guys, of what I'm building. If you haven't seen this over on the Grams, you should really go follow me over there at BleepinJeep, and on Facebook as well at BleepinJeep. Here's a picture underneath its skirt, if you will. This is a mock-up that Alan over at APOC Designs did. I told him what I wanted, my vision, and he was able to create this thing. And this is going to be what I'm building. This is what the FC is going to look like. So it's got the FC cab up front, LJ chassis, Rubicon axles and drivetrain, straight 6 motor, and a TJ bed that's going to be lengthened out back. Of course, it's all fitted with Overlander gear. And you guys can win this. I'm giving it away. So BleepinJeep.com/giveaway if you want to check that out. It's pretty simple to enter, easy to do. You don't need to buy anything if you don't want to. Just go check it out. BleepinJeep.com/giveaway. And yeah, this thing is going to be built for overlanding. I'm going to take one trip in it, and then we're giving it away. And now, back to your regularly scheduled program. So after that penetrant has done its job for a few minutes, we're going to, I think this is a 1/2 inch wrench that goes in there, a 1/2 inch socket. And man, that Penetrant just made it come off easy. I didn't use it on the other side. I should have. And so I decided to use it on this side because it was all rusted and crusty. And man, it made a huge difference getting this thing off. So much easier on this side. So take a hammer if you need to and just gonna smack everything, kind of break it up a little bit. I'm gonna smack the axle shaft, and then I'm gonna use this backing plate because that thing's stuck in there still. I'm gonna use this backing plate to kind of hammer that forward and just pull the axle out of there. Now I'll go ahead and pull the axle shaft, being very careful not to damage that seal inside there. And then the next step I'm going to do is take a picture of this thing, because anytime I mess with brakes, I forget how all that goes together and comes apart. So make sure to take a picture of that. Now we need to get rid of this clip right here. Best way to do that is with a pair of pliers or something. And I'm just going to put my hand on the back and hold that and kind of pry those clips off. There we go. Now, keep track of this stuff. We're going to put it in a box here. Pull the other clip. And then we can pull this spring at the top, and that's the only thing that holds it together. And now it'll kind of all fall apart. I'm going to wipe that clean. Make it real nice and clean and smooth and shiny. Look at that. Look at that yuckiness in there. There's a lot of brake dust and gross stuff. Some of that was that penetrant too. So just get all that clean. And look how beautiful that looks now. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull this off and do the same thing to this flange. Clean that up a bit. And clean the backing plate up as well. Alright, check out how clean that is. Now it's going to go right back on just the way we found it. And then I'm going to take a wire brush and clean up this axle shaft here, the backing plate, and just get all that dirt and grime off of there. All the bearings and everything look to be good. I may replace these with chrome ollies in the future, I'm not sure. But for now we're going to put these brakes on, and I would recommend getting new hardware, but I'll be back in here, and this hardware is actually still good, so I'm going to reuse it for now. So I'm going to put it back just like the picture, and of course I'm going to spin that down as small as it'll go, because now we have material on these brakes. Now you're going to take that whole piece over and just put it right in there where it came from, and hold that in place while you put on the spring back just the way it came. I like to use this trampoline hook thing. It really helps. And that gets it situated there. And then put that pin in the back. Pop the little clips on. Make sure that they're fully seated with a pair of pliers. Clip! Alright, here's another WD-40 product I like to use. This WD-40 Specialist Corrosion Inhibitor. I'm going to spray this on all of these parts, these rusty parts, because I want to inhibit the corrosion on these suckers and keep it from corroding any longer. And especially that backing plate. Those backing plates like to rust away. So I'm not going to spray this on the brake pads or anything, but just inside here, just give it a little quick hit. So this stuff says that it seals and protects metals from the air and moisture that can cause rust. The VCIs continue to work even if some of the sprayed surfaces gets rubbed off, resealing the vulnerable surface. Perfect for protecting equipment like snowblowers, mowers, boats, and trailers before placing in a seasonal storage. That's why I think it will work really well on this, because it's like it's getting stored inside the brake caliper there. But I did spray too much, so I'm going to wipe this down a little bit and spread it around and rub off the excess. There we go. Look how pretty that looks now. That's going to stay rust-free for a long, long time. Next up, I'm going to put a little grease on the race just to make a smooth install here. I made sure everything was nice and clean before that goes back in. And you're going to have to lift up on that to get it through the seal and into the carrier. Then line this sucker up. It's a little hard. You might have to use a screwdriver. to line that retaining plate up. And then on these bolts, a little trick on these nuts is to put 2 nuts into the socket like that. That way you can get this thing started, and you don't want it to fall off like it did there. So make sure you install this by hand at first. You always want to start nuts off by hand, and then you can spin this sucker around and get all 4 of those on there. Get them started by hand, and then cinch them down good and tight. That's the torque spec, good and tight. Now, let's pull this sucker out of the garage, and we're going to make it nice and pretty. I'm going to jack this thing up, and we're going to paint it. Well, first we're going to clean it. So take some brake cleaner or whatever kind of cleaner. You want to make sure that all the grease is off of here. And I've already cleaned this pretty good. I'm just going to hit it one more time. Make sure it's perfectly clean. I like to use brake cleaner or some sort of degreaser. Now I'm using Rust-Oleum Gloss Black in a can, and I like to just brush this stuff on nice and thick. It takes a long time to dry, so if you're not willing to wait, then make sure to hit it with a spray can or something. But this stuff, I did it on the Scorpion, and it works good. I mean, it's black for a long time, and it's pretty thick, and it hardens up nice. So now we need to move on to the front axle, and this is a kit that I got from Barnes, and you'll see here in just a minute. It is a truss. Let's see if there's any other goodies in this box. Oh, what's that? A t-shirt. And one more thing. At the very bottom of this. Oh, yep, there. Oh, oh. Yep, it's a hat. Check that out. Always can use more hats, more shirts. Everybody has to wear a shirt, right? Oh, do I look handsome? All right, let's cut open this truss. This is a front Dana 44 truss, and you'll see I got some extra things there. We'll show you those in a minute. But this truss is keyed, and it's pretty simple install. So let's move the front Dana 44. These are both Rubicon axles, by the way, that I got from a Rubicon TJ. I think an 05 Rubicon TJ. And doing this myself is pretty difficult sometimes. But you gotta work smart instead of hard. So the first thing, this bracket needs to go. So I'm gonna take a grinder, an angle grinder, and just whack this sucker off. The truss is gonna replace that upper control arm bracket. After I cut that off, I'm going to grind it nice and smooth, grind it backwards, that always helps. And then just add an extra filter for aesthetics. Now we're going to put these keyed pieces into the truss. I had to hammer them down just a little bit to make them cinch all the way down. Then put that on the axle, make sure everything lays flat before you tack it up. You want to make sure that it's going to situate on there good. So I like to just tack up these top pieces real quick, and then I'm going to flip it over and make sure it's all good. Now I'm going to take a Sharpie or some sort of marker, and we're going to mark everywhere that we need to grind, because we want bare metal. You don't want to be grinding on paint or dirty or rusty surfaces. So we're going to mark everywhere that needs to be ground. You can see right there. Perfectamundo. Now I need to take all that off. So I've got a little air die grinder, angle die grinder, and a little flap disc. These little flap discs come in handy, and you can find them on my Amazon store. I'll leave a link down below. You just buy them on Amazon, and I'll leave some affiliate links down there. I've got a lot of other Amazon cool stuff, including angle finders like this. So the rule on this is 10 degrees off of center. So I'm going to find center there. It's like 89 degrees or something. And then I'm going to put this on and pull that back to 99 degrees or whatever it is. 10 degrees off of vertical. And that is what the directions on the Barnes truss say to do. Then I'm going to tack it in place. Now the Barnes instructions say to weld it all together on the table, but I prefer to weld this all together on the axle so that you know that it's going to fit. If you weld it together on the table, it might banana up. So I'm welding this together, but I'm doing it in little tiny short increments, like 1 inch at a time, and then I'm moving to a different spot. You don't want to heat your axle up too hot, at least on the tubes anyway. You don't want to heat this truss too hot either, because anything that you heat warps. So if you just weld all the way across this darn thing in one go, it's going to warp like a banana, and that will not be good. You don't want a banana-shaped axle for obvious reasons. So just do it real slow, do it real controlled, make nice good looking welds, and it'll be perfect. I've done this a lot, and it always turns out just fine. There we go. Alright, check this out. So this is a little different though. When you're welding to cast, you want to preheat. And technically you probably want to take the internals out to do this. But again, I've done this a lot of times and it's always worked out okay. I'm going to heat it up to 400 degrees. And I'm just heating this where I'm going to weld it. I'm not going to heat the whole thing to 400 degrees. And a lot of people might take issue with that. And if it comes back to bite me in the butt, then I will say you're right. But I do not think that is necessary in every case. Especially in this pumpkin case. So I'm just going to heat it up pretty good. Right now we're at like 260. And we're just heating all the area around the cast. And I'll show you another trick that I use to make this work better. I'm not heating it up enough where it's going to melt those seals on the inside, because you got your axle seals right there on either side of that pumpkin. There's the trick right there. So I'm going to show you this. I'm going to weld this nice and hot at 400 degrees. The temperature around the welds are already at 400 degrees. And I'm going to weld it in short increments again. And then I'm going to peen it. No, not pee. Peen with an N. And what that's doing is I don't know, it's scientific stuff. I don't understand it because I'm not very smart. But it rearranges the molecules in there so that it doesn't crack later on. So you weld it and then you peen it. And then you weld it and then you peen it some more. At least that's how I do it. And it's always worked for me. So people are probably going to say, "Hey, you're dumb." But if it works, right? And it works. So just go with the flow. Make things simple on yourself, but don't try this at home. So I'm not gonna weld the entire thing. You don't need this whole sucker welded down. You just need, a couple inches here, a couple inches there, a couple inches here, a couple inches there, and you'll be good. I mean, this is not like desert racing here. We're talking about Dana 44 anyway. So weld that up, peen it real good. Right after the yellow goes away out of the weld, I like to peen it. After I'm completely done, it's already cooled quite a bit, so I'm going to heat it back up to around 400 degrees. There's my little laser thermometer I got on Amazon. I got a link to that as well if you're interested. They're super cheap. You ought to have one. And then a welding blanket. Hey, those are on Amazon too. You're going to wrap this sucker in a welding blanket just to keep it from cooling down too rapidly. So you want to keep that as warm as possible for as long as possible. So just let it sit in that blanket for an hour or two. And now I'm coming back and checking the temperature. It's pretty cool. Almost cool. And then I'm going to take a wire brush and we're going to clean it up. I'm going to clean that sucker, because we're going to paint it next, or in a little while. And I got burn marks on it from that torch. So that's the Barnes Truss off. I have a coupon code for that Barnes Truss, by the way. BleepinJeep.com/discounts. Oh man, I forgot this thing. Here, let's put that on real quick. But on the website, BleepinJeep.com/discounts, there's a coupon code there for Barnes. It's a good one. You guys ought to check it out. And not only for Barnes, but for all kinds of companies as well. So anytime you need to buy something, BleepinJeep.com/discounts, or if you just go to BleepinJeep.com and hit member discounts at the top there. Super simple, quick and easy to find. We got codes for Eastwood, we got codes for Adams Drive Shaft, we got codes for Barnes. There's a lot of good stuff on there. Napier fender flares. All right, that sucker is hot. So I'm just going to tack this on all four corners before I weld it up. And this replaces that bushing that we cut off a minute ago. So there we go. We're going to weld on the outside, the back side, and the other side. Check that out. That's a good looking truss right there. Whoa, but that is not good looking. Check those lower control arm mounts off. When I took the bolts out, they were so messed up in there I had to torch them out. So I kind of messed that up. So I got this bracket from Barnes as well that's going to replace those lower control arm brackets, and it's also beefier than the stock one. So we need to cut this off here, here, and right here. To do that, well, before I do that, I want to Sharpie or mark this with a Milwaukee Sharpie. We're going to mark that on the left and the right side, just kind of know where it goes back in place, because once I cut that off and grind it down, I won't be able to tell where it was. So for this instance, I'm going to use my plasma torch. You could use an angle grinder and cutoff wheel, which would work just fine. It's just kind of hard to get into these tight corners, so I chose to use the plasma torch on this instead of the angle grinder. Then you just need a big old hammer. You're going to smack that sucker until it falls off. Hopefully it falls off soon. There we go. Come on, smacker. Got it. Perfect. Oh no! Holy crap! This was unexpected. I started a fire, and then the fire started a plastic fire, or a rubber fire, on this rubber tub that I have underneath here. Probably not a good idea to have storage underneath my welding table. I decided to blow that out instead of use up my fire extinguisher. Lucky I saw that in time, otherwise that'd have been a pretty good blaze. So after you clean these axle tubes up, clean that side as well of the coil bracket. Now figure out which side goes where. We're going to pop that in. Use our marks that we marked before to kind of just line it up. And before we do that, there's these cam bolt fastener things. I hate these cam bolts, but you know, they are what they are. I wanted to get one without the cam bolts, but this is all they had at the time, so that's what I got. And what you need to do is just tack these in, not tack them, but weld those in. They're laser marked, by the way, so you can't get it wrong. You just put it right over those laser holes, and then they'll look like that when you're done. Make sure you buy the cam bolts too. You have to have the cam bolts for these. After that, I'm going to tack this into place on 4 corners. Man, that's looking good. And then do warp speed welding after that. And then slow motion welding. Always helps to do warp speed, then slow-mo welding. Oh, pretty. Cool. On that side I did outside and outside, and then outside again on the buckets. And then on this side I couldn't really reach in there, so I did inside and outside, which 2 sides on 1/4 inch is good enough. You don't need to get all 4 sides. That would be just overkill. And then of course I welded it to the bucket. And there you go. Next up, we need to replace these ball joints, because I have no idea what's going on with these ball joints or how old they are, whether they're good or bad. So you're going to need some pliers, some wrenches, and we're going to take off the nut, but keep this upper nut in place. I'll show you why here in a second. You want to loosen it up, but then keep it right at the bottom there. Now you're going to take your smacker, and we're going to smack. And then we're going to smack again. And then we're going to readjust, and readjust some more. And then we're going to smack again. And smack again. And you just keep repeating this smacking again process until something gives. And hopefully that will not be your knuckle. There's a little flat spot right there just for you to smack though. It's like a built-in smacker. Once you hit that enough times hard enough, it definitely will come off. Sometimes you got to hit it pretty hard though. I kept that bolt on there obviously to keep it from dropping on my toes. And that is how you get your knuckle off. So the next step, we need to get these ball joints out. And for that, I've got this ball joint removal tool. Amazon link down below. But the main thing that you want to get is this additional piece right here. Now this piece comes in super handy because it's got these cutouts and it's got these pieces that are functional for Mopar and Dana axles. I forget. I think it's Chrysler. It's like a Chrysler add-on to the ball joint press. Made by OTC, and it's definitely necessary. Not necessary, but it'll provide a headache relief because it's so much easier to have these parts rather than just what comes with the ball joint press, and you'll see why here in a second. So you're gonna put this sucker on, and it doesn't matter how you do it. You can do this in multiple ways. The main thing is that you have it pushing the right direction. So you want to push or pull that ball joint off of there and make sure that you got it going the right way. But you can set up the ball joint press in a number of different ways. It all comes to the same result of getting this thing out of there. So this is where this piece comes in handy. See how it has that cutout right there? The other piece, the regular ball joint press, does not have that. So this, I'm going to call it the Chrysler edition of your ball joint press, really comes in handy right there. And then I'll show you in a minute another piece that it comes with. I think that top piece even came with it too. And it's really just like a extra ball joint add-on to this ball joint thing that you really have to have if you've got a Jeep. It just makes things so much more simple. And yes, it's kind of expensive, but totally worth it. Alright, so I've got both ball joints out now. You can see that one's got a little bit of slop to it, so I'm glad I decided to replace these for this FC giveaway. Next, I'm going to clean it up. Put your rag in there and swish it around like you're giving somebody a wedgie. Alright. It's a good thing to clean all this stuff up before we put the new ones in. We don't want any dirt, grime, rust in there. So here's the new ball joints, and this is what I mean by having that special Chrysler add-on. See how... Oh, I gotta go through the upper hole with the ball joint press. But see how this thing is curved? That really helps get that in there straight, because you're trying to push a straight piece into an angled piece, and it's hard if you don't have that curved piece there. So no matter how you set this up, it doesn't really matter, but you want that top piece to be bigger than what you're trying to shove through the hole there. And then you want to spin that down until it bottoms out. Spin, spin, spin. Spin some more. And then it bottoms out eventually. And you can see how that angled piece really helped. Otherwise it would have been all off kilter and kind of janky to get that to shove up in there. Make sure you don't forget that little rubber boot. You want to put that back on and just kind of Line it up, push it in, make sure it's good. Now I'm going to coat this sucker in grease. I forgot to do that on the first one. And get that hole lined up where it'll be easy to put your cotter pin in when it's finished. So, I have no idea what I just pointed at right there. But I think basically I'm saying it doesn't matter how you do this as long as you do it. You just kind of play with all these pieces. There's a lot of pieces with the ball joint press. You want to make sure that the piece that is on the bottom is big enough that this can fit through it. I think that's what I'm saying. So make sure that that piece there isn't smaller than the hole or the ball joint itself. Oh, you also have to make sure that it all fits in the ball joint, because your ball joint tool is only a certain size and it won't open so far. So I figured that this is the best way. There's that Chrysler Edition piece on the bottom that's angled, and once again that's going to help us to get the right angle. Angle to angle makes zero angle, if that makes sense. Now, this ball joint press, the anti-seize is going to get everywhere, as you can see. If you guys remember my anti-seize commercial, if not, go check it out. Search for BleepinJeep anti-seize. But anyway, you should put some on your ball joint press every now and again to keep that thing from just seizing up. That would be real bad. Then you'd have to get a ball joint press for your ball joint press. So, tighten that top one down until it's snug. And then make sure you don't forget that boot once again. Now, we're going to put a little bit of grease on that sucker and pop it in, and then put the nuts on just to hold it in place. Put the bottom nut on. This bottom nut was actually bigger than the original one that came off of it. I don't know why. Just a different design, I guess. And then make sure you do a slow-mo grimace into the camera for some reason. I don't know what that was all about. Oh, yeah, because I forgot to grease them. That's why. That was what that grimace was for. So I'm just going to tighten that down a little bit, and then I think the bottom one is 80 foot-pounds. Of course, this is for my axle. Make sure you check the specs on your axle. 80 foot-pounds on the bottom, and of course, that hole's never going to line up, so you're just going to have to go a little bit further than 80 pounds. If you got a trick to make that hole line up exactly at 80 pounds, let me know, because I have yet to figure it out. Alright, so you got to get that cotter pin hole lined up, so make sure you know where that hole is before you start with the nut. Otherwise, it's hard to find. There's the hole. Looks like it needs to go a little further before that'll line up. And of course, the axle's trying to move on the table. Needs a little leg room push. And then you're good to go with your cotter pin. Sweet. Bend that sucker around at the bottom. And then the top one is 75 foot-pounds. And then don't forget to put your little grease Zerk fittings in there and a little pump of grease. And then that's it. Then you need to give that sucker a spin. Of course, it's hard to do, so camera magic. Yeah, that's a self-spinning axle right there. Now I'm going to hang that up, and we're going to paint this sucker. Once again, Rust-Oleum gloss black with a paintbrush. That's the way I like to do it. It just lasts longer if I'm doing a new build. Gloss black, baby. Sweet. There it is. Let it harden for a couple of days, and that axle will be pretty underneath that FC170. Make sure to sign up to win this thing. Remember, we're giving this thing away. This is what it's going to look like when it's finished, and it's going to be pretty rad. There's a lot of cool stuff going into this build. So BleepinJeep.com/giveaway for all the details on that. Pretty easy. you got a pretty good chance of winning as well. And make sure that you subscribe to the channel, of course. Hit the thumbs up, and we'll see you guys in the next video.